Hi there and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to tackle the issue of immigration in Portugal, specifically some protests which are brewing regarding the cancellation of the manifestation of interest programme. For those who are not aware, the manifestation of interest programme was a rather loopy policy that the previous socialist government of Portugal had in place, which basically allowed people from various nations around the world to come to Portugal on a tourist visa and then to apply to CEF, or as it later became IMA, just basically by saying that they want to look for work here, they're interested in employment. They didn't actually have to find a job, they just had to say that they were looking for a job here, they're interested in work. So incredibly, tremendously easy. And these people could get residency just based on that. Now, unsurprisingly, it was one of the factors which contributed heavily to the fact that CEF and IMA were completely overwhelmed. And it's well known that IMA, even today, as far as I know the latest figures, has a backlog of about 430,000 of these types of cases which they're working through in one way or another. It was in fact recently mentioned by the government that new applications to IMA had decreased by 80% in the last few months, and that was enabling them both to clear the backlog and to just get on with the routine work that they should be doing. Basically, this is good news for anyone else who isn't, a manifestation of interest applicant with IMA. People like me who did family reunification for my wife, or people who want to come here on D7 visas to retire, for example. I think that they're going to have a fundamentally far easier time in dealing with the Portuguese immigration authorities, basically dealing with IMA, than when we had all of these manifestation of interest applications in the system clogging it up. Now, I think it's fair to say that there are many immigrants and immigrant organisations that haven't taken very kindly to the cancellation of the manifestation of interest programme, particularly the fact that it was cancelled basically overnight by the government in June of 2024. And they've staged many little protests around the country, and now they're planning a big one on October 25th, scheduled to take place in the afternoon outside Parliament. These people believe that manifestation of interest is a human right. They think that it is their God-given right to basically live and work in Portugal if they want to. They're also demanding equal rights and documents for everyone. Presumably this means that they think that an immigrant from somewhere like the Philippines or Nepal should have equal standing with someone from Angola or Brazil who are being brought to Portugal under different immigration programs. And also perhaps even with EU migrants. I really don't know what they think, but they want equal rights and documents for everybody. And they're claiming that their presence and the restoration of manifestation of interest applications will help to build the country in the fight against security policies, xenophobia and racism. Now, I understand xenophobia and racism, but security policies, aren't they good? They're designed to keep out people who might be prejudicial or dangerous. I think they would really have to clarify what they mean by that. But from what I read, it does seem very much that these groups are in favour of the open doors policy, basically what the old socialist government had, and they want everybody to have the right to come into Portugal and thereby come into Europe, because Portugal is, somewhat of a gateway country. It offered, historically, with manifestation of interest, very, very easy access to getting a residence permit, and once somebody was a resident in Portugal, they could be on the pathway to PR, they could be on the pathway to citizenship. The requirements aren't very difficult to meet, and then they can go anywhere in the EU. And even before that, if they're a resident in Portugal, they can be contracted by a company in Portugal and then sent to other European countries to work, and there's definitely a lot of that goes on, particularly with Brazilians. To me, it is absolutely bizarre that these immigrant groups have the opinion that it is their right, they are entitled to work and be resident in Portugal. I wonder by virtue of what? It's quite confusing for me. Because, you can't go to Nepal or the Philippines or India or Thailand or China or Kazakhstan and just turn up. You can't just rock up there and say, hey, I'm on a tourist visa, but I'm staying here, I'm going to be a resident. It's just frankly completely unfathomable. You'd be kicked out super fast. I mean, if you tried to do that kind of thing in somewhere like Thailand, where I've lived, then it's not going to work out well for you. You're probably going to spend some time in an immigration cell waiting to be deported, and you're definitely going to get a fine. There's no way that you're just going to be allowed to, sit there and say, I'm a resident now because basically I have this human right. And it's the same situation in most of these countries. I mean, I, as a European citizen, can't just turn up in Kenya or Nigeria or Brazil or Nepal and say, hey, here I am, I'm going to start working now, I'm a resident. No, it's absolutely absurd to suggest that. But yet these people, from those countries, many of those countries, think that they have the God-given right to come to Portugal. And of course, once they're in Portugal, they can get on the social benefit system. They can get various kinds of welfare. They can bring their family over using family reunification. Many of their family members might not even speak English. That will put pressure on the education system. Not to mention any health problems that they might have, and I already have a separate video, a recent video, which covers some of the impact of immigration on the SNS in Portugal and indeed on other European health services such as the NHS in the UK. I really wonder where these people got their ideas, and I think that it really comes from, these kind of bleeding heart liberals who have the idea that Europe is responsible for the ills of the world and, white people have the responsibility to help people out. You hear some really ridiculous claims and phrases from these people. They don't like to use illegal immigration. They go with irregular immigration because they think that that sounds so much better. They have slogans like people are not illegal to excuse illegal immigration. You should try applying that kind of logic when you've entered, India illegally, or you've entered China illegally, or you've entered, Azerbaijan illegally. I'm sure it will get a really favourable reception. Other ideas like borders or just lines, or these people bring cultural enrichment to European countries. I think the culture of Europe is rich enough. And I think Europeans, including Portuguese, should be proud of their culture. We don't need to import other cultures. And if someone says something like that, then of course you always get people bringing up, they bring good food. Well, maybe some of them have food which we like. Great, that's fantastic. A few people being admitted into the country is sufficient to transmit the food and open up a restaurant. We don't need 500,000 people from Nepal or something like that in the EU in order to, popularise Nepalese food, for example. At the core of all of this, of course, is the idea that Europe has a duty to help the world, to aid the world and to solve the world's problems, and that somehow our continent, including Portugal, because it's part of our continent, obviously, can be a home for the world. We can take all of the needy people who are not satisfied with their economic conditions or social situations. They can simply uproot themselves and leg it to Europe, set up shop here, and we will be all too happy to accommodate them. Well, I can tell you, I don't feel too happy to accommodate them. I think that they represent a significant burden on our societies in terms of the pressure that they put on the social welfare services, education, healthcare, public transport, basically you name it. And of course, all of that feeds into an increase in the tax burden, which obviously I don't welcome, and to be honest, I don't think anybody does. There is one ray of hope in all of this absurdity, and that is that the former president of the European Commission, Mr. Barroso, who is also a former Portuguese Prime Minister, recently stated that in Europe, most people don't want much more immigration, which is definitely true, and I'm glad he's finally getting the message on that. And he also said that multiculturalism has its limits. You know, in 2010, Angela Merkel said that multiculturalism had definitely failed. It seems that it hasn't quite died though, because people are still talking about the benefits of it. But it does seem that the message is finally getting through on this, and that is a source of happiness at least. As the article indicates, these migrant groups are very much out there on their own, thankfully, in demanding their human right to settle in Portugal and to reside where they please. No Portuguese party as yet has come out and supported the movement, and I very much doubt that they will. It has been recognised, I think, in the corridors of power in Portugal that the manifestation of interest programme was a complete disaster, and it has burdened the country with a lot of migrants who, some of whom have no job at all, and they're just living in the country looking for work. And I really don't think that it is a situation which promotes social harmony, social safety, or economic development. I really don't. So I hope that the government continues to stick to its guns and to implement this policy strictly, and actually to follow it up with even more stringent immigration policies which staunch the flow of migration into Portugal, because there are already way too many migrants in this small European country. The government needs to focus, and I think is focusing, on retaining Portuguese people in Portugal, especially young Portuguese, and if possible bringing them back. So we see programs like, for example, IRS Jovem, which is designed to incentivize younger people to stay in Portugal and work here. And I think that that is the direction to go in. It doesn't mean it's a perfect policy, but it's a step in the right direction. In Europe, in Portugal, we do not need waves of migrants from Africa, South America, and Central Asia in order to repopulate the country or, solve perceived demographic problems. I think there are many other techniques which can be used which are far more viable and will cause less social disruption in society than allowing a lot of migrants from the developing world to enter the country and set up residence here basically at will. Alright, well that'll do it for this video. I hope people found the content enjoyable, and I will see you soon in the next one.